Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from, of course, The Federalist, and it's dated October 3rd. It says, the left has abandoned rational debate and embraced political violence. And we're, again, going to keep harping on this because it's worth mentioning. And here's a picture of Ezra Klein talking to Ta-Nehisi Coates, and who is just a... If you want to know... What's the right way to put this? If you want to just see what anti-Americanism is, it's Ta-Nehisi Coates. And he's one of those guys that I've listened to very little of him, admittedly, but I don't know why he's held up as some sort of actual deep thinker on the far left, because as I said about people on the far left all the time is that they're stupid, and he just lives up to that. Anyway, let's get into it. It says, the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder should leave no doubt. The left has become a political movement predicated on violence and coercion. It says, with each passing day, it becomes more obvious that the left has become incapable of rational debate or political compromise, and must now embrace the only tools available to it: intimidation, coercion, and political violence. Whatever liberals might believe about their progressive politics, today their program is based not on persuasion or representation, still less on open-minded rational inquiry or practical solutions to problems. It's based on force. Because the assassination of Charlie Kirk last month is, of course, emblematic of what the left has become. It says Kirk was murdered for speaking out against transgenderism. Dissenting from that ideology in particular is intolerable for the left because it encapsulates an idea of total liberation, even from nature itself. But there are plenty of examples just from the past week of the left resorting to violence or threats of violence to advance their cause. It says, call it the assassins or rioters veto, the last tactic of a liberal project that has reached an intellectual and political dead end in the aftermath of Kirk's assassination. It says, consider the cancellation of a Federalist Society event scheduled for October 7th at New York University Law School, which cited security reasons, and scare quotes, and fears that anti-Israel protesters would disrupt it. The event was to feature conservative legal scholar Ilya Shapiro discussing his new book, Lawless, The Miseducation of American Elites. Sounds like something I may want to read. But since Shapiro is Jewish, oh no, and has been critical of campus anti-Israel protests in the past, the same sort of protests NYU officials anticipate on October 7th, and which, according to reporting from the Washington Free Beacon, the school is apparently unable to control. And yet, as the Beacon further reported, the law school is slated to host a 7-hour symposium on social entrepreneurship, impact investing, and sustainable development that same day. They don't fear riots over that event, but cannot, or will not, guarantee the safety of Shapiro's event, because they don't care. He's a conservative Jew. They're going to be like, yeah, we don't care. Whatever happens, happens. I mean, again, they don't care. It says, what's more, for weeks now, law school officials have been changing their justification for why they canceled the event, alternatively citing the threat of protests, a conflicting private event, the inability to host outside speakers the week of October 7th, and a lack of space. But we all know the real reason law school officials canceled the Federalist Society event. Shapiro is Jewish and conservative, as I said. They fear anti-Semitic rioters will attack the event and possibly Shapiro himself, and they are unwilling to do what's necessary to protect him. It says that's how the rioters' veto works, and it's become commonplace on the left for the simple reason that the left refuses to engage in debate about these things. They've reached the end of rational inquiry and civil dialogue and are increasingly resorting to force. Or consider what's unfolded this week in Portland, and that's still relevant as you're going to be hearing this, I'm sure, and as I'm recording this, where Antifa rioters have besieged an immigration and customs enforcement facility and recently began attacking members of the press who dared to report on what's happening there. Says Katie Daviscourt, a reporter for the Post-Millennial, was attacked by an Antifa rioter who hit her in the face with a wooden flagpole, swinging it like a baseball bat, in Daviscourt's own words, or Daviscourt, sorry. Portland police were on the scene, but allowed the masked assailant to escape despite Daviscourt identifying her attacker to an officer at the scene. The next day, she appeared on Fox News and on Jack Posobiec's show with a black eye. And the person who did it went and made like a TikTok where she completely lied about it, even though the entire thing and the whole interaction, Katie Daviscourt recorded up, all the way to like the confrontation with the police officer saying that's her. The cops did nothing. Like, you can go look at this right now, okay, and find this video. And she's got like a giant shiner too. But, and then I should say, I'm not even gonna go with a but I'm gonna say, but, I guess I will go with a but. Well, Harmeet Dillon, what is she, the assistant to Pam Bondi, or assistant, I can't remember her exact title, but she's now investigating the Portland Police Department, not because of this, but because of what happened with Nick Sorter, from the time I'm recording this, I think it was last night. And this thing that happened to Katie Davis Court is part of her inquiry into what's happening, is just why was nothing done about this. So keeping going on here, it says the situation in Portland is a rolling example of the left's institutionalization of political violence. The city's police chief is denying there's a problem at all, which is just funny in and of itself, probably because he doesn't want to get attacked, while a member of the city council is instructing Antifa agitators to hide their identities and use burner phones to escape prosecution. And that lady, who I know who it is, should be arrested. It says, amid the chaos, Antifa is displaying a high level of coordination as it attacks journalists and threatens ICE agents. It says, one clip circulating online shows Antifa members whisking away the suspect who attacked Davis Court to a nearby safe house, even as Portland police stood down and refused to immediately respond to the assault. And if we know where their safe house is, can you not go in there and take them all out? And I mean, like, take them out of the place, not kill them. Okay, like, take them all out and arrest them. Okay? So one could go on, cataloging recent examples of leftist intolerance and violence, but it's important to understand the intellectual thread that connects all these examples, from the assassination of Kirk to the street-level violence in Portland to the institutional cowardice, or malice, of NYU Law School. That thread is what we might call the epistemic closure of the contemporary left. That term, epistemic closure, and thank you for defining this, because I would not have known what this is otherwise, or maybe he's not, but it says, became popular about 15 years ago among prominent liberal writers like Jonathan Chait and Matthew Iglesias, who were trying to make the case that conservatives were trapped in an intellectual world in which the only trustworthy sources of information or analysis came from within the conservative media movement or media. So again, thank you for defining that. I guess he did. This is Chait, who writes for the New York Times, so that should just give you an idea of where he's coming from. And Matthew Iglesias writes for Vox, so again, giving you an idea where they come from. So Chait was responding to left libertarian writer Julian Sanchez on this issue, argued that the reason the right displayed more tendencies toward epistemic closure than the left is because the conservative movement is ideological in a way liberalism isn't. Because so liberals are always, their mindset is always, we're the good guys. Conservatives are always the bad guys. So they're always going to make excuses for their own behavior, which is what Jonathan Chait does on the regular. It says liberals, argued Chait, display an open-mindedness to rational inquiry that conservatives generally lack. So obviously this is projection. It says, why do they supposedly lack it? Responding to Sanchez's assertion that we should sideline the cheap partisan explanation that conservatism intrinsically appeals to the stupid or closed-minded, well, that's nice. Chait suggests we shouldn't necessarily sideline the explanation because, in fact, conservatives do have a simplistic and closed-minded approach to politics. All right, so he's an ass. Says, however outlandish this argument was in the halcyon days of 2010, it's the stuff of fever dreams today. No serious person in 2025 on the right or left would argue that liberals in 2025 display an open-mindedness to rational inquiry. Yeah, I certainly would not. It says, indeed, the overarching feature of liberalism in the Trump era is the epistemic closure that liberals ascribe to conservatives in the Obama era, a fundamental intolerance of anyone who dissents from liberal views, and an inability to comprehend conservative ideas or perspectives. So this has been true for a long time now, and it was arguably true in 2010 when Chait was smirking at the Tea Party. And by the way, the Tea Party has taken over, and thankfully they have, the Republican Party, and that's basically what MAGA is. And not smirking now, are you, buddy? Says, but what's new is the left's open embrace of violence and transparently violent rhetoric in the face of dissent and invitations to rational inquiry from the right, precisely the kind of rational inquiry that Charlie Kirk engaged in. Says, the manipulation of language, long a mainstay of the left, has become a hallmark of this turn to violence. I would call it Orwellian, but Orwell now appears tame by comparison. Zoran Mamdani this week declared in a speech about how he wants to empty New York City's jails, good luck New York, that violence is an artificial construction, so he's retarded. So, good luck, New York. Says this is the kind of thing people say when they're trying to justify actual physical violence. If you define violence as an artificial construct, then you can alternately make the case that speech is violence, at least when the speaker is a conservative like Kirk. The arbitrariness of this way of arguing shows all the signs of what Chait and other open-minded liberals, and I'd probably put open-minded in scare quotes there, of the 2010s would have called epistemic closure. Whether violence is itself good or bad, real or artificial, seems to depend on who is talking. Conservatives can't be trusted because they're conservative. So what this spells for the left is the collapse of anything like reasoned dialogue or civil debate. In a long-winded column this week in the New York Times, Tressie McMillan Cottom, I don't know who that is, it's a heck of a name, wove a tangled, convoluted narrative about the Red Scare President Trump and conservatives like Kirk have allegedly unleashed on America. Conservatives in the Trump era, she says, have weaponized debate. No, they're just debating. by which she means they're befuddling the left with their arguments. Conservatives have confused liberals, for example, about the bounds of womanhood so as to capture their angst about changing expectations of manhood, says Cottom, a clumsy and dishonest reference to the debate over transgenderism, which the left is losing badly, thanks in part to the skill of people like Kirk. Indeed, the trans issue is helpful in exposing both the intolerance and actual violence that now defines the mainstream left. Simply having to hear conservative arguments about transgenderism, says Cottom, is its own kind of political violence. No, speech is not violence. Knock it off with that nonsense. To say this just weeks after Kirk was murdered in front of his family by a trans ally for engaging in this very debate is to engage in a form of doublespeak that would, again, make Orwell blush. The left isn't blushing, though. Their brightest lights, such as they are unwilling to consider whether or not they have walked themselves into a box canyon. A clip from a recent Ezra Klein podcast with Ta-Nehisi Coates, that's where the screen print at the very top of the article came from, has gone viral in part for laying bare the seething intolerance and intellectual hubris of the left. At one point in their exchange, Klein notes that a majority of Americans disagree with transgenderism. They don't think men should compete in women's sports or use women's bathrooms, and they don't think anyone should be compelled to use preferred pronouns or affirm that men can become women. Klein says that he and Coates both know that those people are fundamentally and morally wrong. They're not. But asks what can be done about them, given that they are a majority of America. Klein knows that this majority will never be convinced to adopt his and Coates' views, and he recognizes, to his credit, that this presents a dilemma. These people must be negotiated with or suppressed by force. Coates, who says Kirk was a hate-monger, unworthy of mourning, has no real answer. And if he's saying that about Charlie Kirk, he's never actually listened to a word of Charlie Kirk. He's only saying this because he's heard other people say things about Charlie Kirk that are wrong, so he's fed wrong information. Again, Ta-Nehisi Coates is not an intelligent person. Do not listen to him, as he is not concerned about the dilemma Klein is trying to get him to recognize. On the question of transgenderism, Coates believes the conservative view is dehumanizing. If you think it is okay to dehumanize people, he says, then conversation between you and me is probably not possible. That's the line he draws. And that's where the left is now. Conversation, in their view, is probably not possible with the opposing side. Kirk thought it was, and he dedicated his life to it. Perhaps he was wrong. We'll see. But for now, it's not too much to say that Kirk's assassin and Coates are on the same side of this question. They share the same view on civil discourse. They are not really interested in talking. And I believe this is the final paragraph. It is. It says, Coates and Klein and other prominent liberals can formally disavow violence all they want, but it has become impossible to deny that they belong to a political project that has no theory of mind for the right and is unable to grasp why conservatives believe the things they believe. It's because they never, Ezra Klein does, actually. I know he's talked to Ben Shapiro before, so he will talk to conservatives. Ta-Nehisi Coates won't. Because they have arrived at epistemic closure, which is going to involve all of us. Here at the end of the line, erstwhile liberals, once so proud of their open-mindedness to rational inquiry, are taking refuge in the only thing they have left, the brute application of force. Yeah, I said this already in a previous video, it's going to get worse. And, the people on the far left, who I would say is Ta-Nehisi Coates, Ezra Klein's not a leftist. He's like just a regular liberal. Kind of maybe has some progressive ideas, but he's not horrible. I don't like him personally, his beliefs on anything. I think he's the one that's morally wrong, as he said in there. But, what do you think about this? Do you agree with these two, or do you agree with the liberals and their kind of smug things like, we're always right, you're always wrong? Or what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.